Alms for Jihad, Chapter 3, The Banks. Islamic charities gave much of the organizational structure to support terrorism. There was a need to transport men, money, and weapons efficiently, but the money had to be available in many different locations, and the banks provided a way to do this. The charities, especially the large ones like the World Assembly of Muslim Youth and the International Islamic Relief Organization, would have been unable to move most of the money that the terrorists needed to carry out their jihad. In the search of the offices of Benevolence International Foundation, or BIF, one of the charities mentioned in the last chapter, in Bosnia in March 2002, officers discovered, among other things, a golden chain document. It had a list of 20 wealthy donors, 6 bankers, 12 businessmen, and 2 others. The 18 known members of that group have a net worth of $85 billion altogether. The term golden chain is also interesting. In Hadith scholarship, it is a term for the progression of prophets in Islam from Adam to Muhammad. All those named in the golden chain list from Bosnia supported Islamic charities, and all 6 bankers were major principals in the banks Al-Riyad, Al-Raji, or the National Commercial Bank, run by no other than Khalid bin Mahfouz, the Saudi banker who threatened a libel suit against Cambridge University Press for publishing this book. See the first video for more information. Those banks are the 3 largest banks of Saudi Arabia, and all those golden chain members were able to transfer funds easily throughout the world before 9/11. Bin Laden's finance manager testified that he had money in a web of bank accounts in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Mohammed Atta wired money to Bin Laden right before the 9/11 attack. After 9/11, the U.S. published names and locations of financial institutions that terrorist organizations used for banking and moving money. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act froze foreign terrorist bank accounts. One of the names on the list was Tassin Abdullah al-Qadi, former head of the Muwafaq Foundation, which channeled millions from Saudi businesses to al-Qaeda. You can find out more about the ties between Muwafaq and bin Mahfouz in the first video in this series. The Patriot Act of October 2001 revealed wire transfers linking al-Qaeda and terrorist cells in Europe. In 1999, the U.S. discovered the Dubai Islamic Bank was a major conduit for bin Laden's funds. Nearly half of the $500,000 used to prepare for 9/11 came from this bank. This bank has also been linked to the bombings of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Jean-Charles Brissard, who is named in the Cambridge University Press apology letter to bin Mahfouz, argued that the success of al-Qaeda was due to bankers, oilmen, and construction magnates, supposed allies of the U.S., that also supported Islamic charities providing funds to bin Laden. Al-Qaeda depended on funds from AHIF, BIF, IIRO, MWL, the Rabita Trust, and WAMY. Also, Saudi business enterprises and direct funding from wealthy individuals were crucial to this network. In 2003, after the Khobar Tower bombings, Saudi Arabia still did not agree to outside evaluation and did not form the Financial Intelligence Unit, FIU, it was asked to form after it joined. Saudi banking. Saudi banks are intertwined with the Saudi royal family. In 1744, Muslim reformer Muhammad Abd al-Wahhab allied himself with Muhammad ibn Saud, ruler of the Dariyah in Najd. Thus the religion-state connection was solidified. The state adapted Sharia law instead of tribal customs. Wahhabis raided tribes who had control in Saudi Arabia, destroyed Shiite shrines of Karbala, Iraq, occupied Mecca and Medina, and destroyed tombs of revered Muslim, quote, saints. Muhammad Ali of the Ottomans in 1822 destroyed the core of Wahhabi power in Najd, but not the Wahhabi movement itself. Restoration of Wahhabism in the late 1800s by Abdulaziz bin Abdulrahman bin Saud recaptured Riyadh and restored Saudi family power in Najd. They fought against the Ottoman Turks with funding from Britain. In 1924, they again occupied Mecca and Medina with Aziz. It was he who used the Ikhwan, the Brotherhood, to attack pilgrims and Shiites, but then turned his back on them and slaughtered them with the help of the British when it became clear that the pilgrimages were too profitable for Mecca and Medina. The Ikhwan were defeated in 1932, the same year Aziz signed an agreement with the U.S. for oil prospecting. He consolidated power with the ulama, or Islamic clerics, imposed Sharia law, and promoted the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, and one of the 5 pillars of Islam. Banking in the Muslim world was developed only because of large transactions for oil. The National Commercial Bank, headed by the bin Mahfouz family, was the first domestic institution to get a banking license from the royal family. Prince Faisal asked Salim bin Mahfouz, father of Khalid bin Mahfouz, for a loan for the royal treasury, but was turned down. This shows the power that the banks now had. It could turn down a loan to the royal family itself. As it turned out, Faisal withdrew his money and Mahfouz relented. King Saud became unpopular with his own family. He was a spendthrift and even supported the Egyptian secular dictator Abdel Nasser. Saud was deposed and replaced by Faisal in 1964. Faisal imposed austerity reforms and attracted the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, persecuted by Nasser. Muhammad Qutb, brother of Sayyid Qutb, who gave the inspiration for the resurrected Muslim Brotherhood, went to Saudi Arabia. Faisal advocated education for women and did much to modernize Saudi Arabia, bringing Saudi TV to the country for the first time in 1965. Claiming that the new TV broadcast violated the Islamic prohibition against graven images, religious conservatives started bloody riots in Riyadh. The king's own nephew was shot in a shootout with police during one protest. It was Faisal who imposed the oil embargo on the U.S. and Israel's European allies, and money poured into Saudi Arabia. With the money came immigrants, Muslim and non-Muslim. A delegation from Kuwait came in March 1975 with the brother of the Saudi king's nephew who was killed in the protest. When he approached Faisal to give the customary kiss, he took out his pistol and unloaded it into the king's head. After the assassination, 7 Western banks formed joint ventures with new Saudi banks. Saudi banking became a sophisticated and powerful sector in the Muslim world and the West. The leading bank was the NCB. Profits and government spending did not create much pressure to institute good banking practices. The recession and the oil price collapse of 1986 came as a shock to Saudi bankers, and borrowers defaulted. The mini boom in oil revenues ended the recession after the Kuwait-Iraq War. It seems that U.S. wars benefit Saudi Arabia. In 2003, the Saudi economy had a surplus of $12 billion. In 2004, the Saudi reserves climbed to $25 billion due to oil price increases. Much of that was on the backs of the American people. 80% of that total came from the U.S. Islamic banking. The Muslim Brotherhood in Albania promoted Islamic banking and had as a priority an Islamic economic system. Islamic finance is an attempt to Islamize modernity. In Islam, it is objectionable to invest in alcohol, gambling, pornography, etc. There cannot be a guaranteed rate of return in an Islamic bank. There is no interest, but profit sharing is allowed. Business risk is shared equally by depositor and banker. Islamic banking allows deferred payment, leasing, trust finance in which one party provides capital and the other the labor, and musharaka or equity participation. Please see a link to find out more about Islamic finance. Islamic banks see deposits as shares that do not guarantee their nominal value. This definitely would discourage many wealthy investors. However, in the 1990s, Islamic banks grew by 15% annually. Many Islamic states continued to discourage Islamic banking because of the ties to the Muslim Brotherhood or as a financial instrument of the governing elite. In Geneva, the Arab Commercial Bank opened under Francois Genoux, who could have been on the Brotherhood's payroll. In Saudi Arabia in the 1990s, it established Al Rajhi Bank, the first Islamic bank in Saudi Arabia. Its purpose was to promote the legitimacy of the royal family. Consider the struggle that the family has had over the decades to maintain its legitimacy as the guardian of Sunni Islam and the cities of Mecca and Medina. Its head, Suleiman al-Rajhi, was a member of the Golden Chain. The Dar al-Mal al-Islami Bank had connections to bin Laden and created the bank called Al-Taqwa, which means fear of God. The National Commercial Bank, or NCB, with bin Mahfouz as its head, is the most important bank in Saudi Arabia. The bank was charged with embezzlement, fraud, misrepresentation, sham loans, and money laundering in the 1990s. It controlled assets transferred to Saudi state authorities, and so emerged stronger than ever as the country's most important bank. The Saudi royal family kept the bank going even after the sanctions. The West had suspicions that the NCB was being used as a financial conduit that funneled millions to charities believed to be serving bin Laden's front groups. The Dala al-Baraka Group, founded in 1969 by Saleh Abdallah Kanal, had as a member the Al-Baraka Investment and Development Corporation, BIDC. The U.S. singled it out because of questionable investments in 2 banks suspected of having links to terrorists, Al-Aqsa in Palestine and Al-Baraka Exchange in Somalia. The BIDC owned part of Bank Al-Taqwa in the Bahamas, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein. Bank Al-Taqwa was a shell bank for financial transactions to support international terrorism. It was established in the Bahamas in 1988 with financing from the Muslim Brotherhood. The same year, Al-Qaeda formed. The Bahamas had favorable banking laws and tax exemptions. Several of its investors were, curiously, from the bin Laden family. Its directors were Yusuf Nada, a Muslim brother, and Ahmed Nasreddin, who created shell operations in Italy. Wealthy Saudis were also big contributors to Bank al-Taqwa. In 1996, Italian intelligence linked al-Taqwa to Hamas, the Algerian Armed Islamic Group, and the Islamic Salvation Front. However, after 9/11, al-Taqwa operations in the Bahamas and Liechtenstein were closed. Nada and Nasraddin together established and identified 25 shell companies that served as conduits for Hamas.